Into another day of our daily Devos. Your daily Devo coming at you. Pastor Rick here, and we are in the book of Hosea, chapter 5 is where we're at. And so the first three chapters, we just spent some time walking through Hosea's family, his calling, what God kind of told him to do. Go and marry Gomer, who was a harlot, a prostitute, a promiscuous woman, and they have had at least one kid together themselves, and then the other two kids, the way the Bible references them, seem that they may have been not necessarily Hosea's biological children. And so then as we shifted into chapter 4, it starts talking about the case of the Lord against Israel, against the northern kingdom of Israel. And so that's what we're kind of continuing into that journey. And so we're going to jump into chapter 5. Hear this, priests. Pay attention, house of Israel. Listen, royal house. So pretty much just covered everybody. We got the priests. We got the regular old people, the house of Israel. And we got the royalty. The king is included here as well. So there are no exceptions. This evil has touched every single person in the whole community, the whole nation, the whole kingdom. So so for the judgment applies to you because you have been a snare at Mizpah and a net spread out on Tabor. Excuse me. And they also, at Mizpah, they had kind of a false place of worship. And then Tabor was like a high place where they were doing some worship to other deities. And so those are because you've been a snare and spread a net. So again, these false places of worship and these high places and places where they're basically going and committing the spiritual adultery on the Lord are a snare. They're a snare to the people. So rebels are deeply involved in slaughter. I will be a punishment for all of them. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hidden from me. For now, Ephraim, you have acted promiscuously, and Israel is defiled. Their actions do not allow them to return to their God. Their actions do not allow them to return to their God. For a spirit of promiscuity is among them, and they do not know the Lord. They do not know the Lord. So two big pieces here. Their actions don't allow them to return to their God because their actions are full of self-centeredness. Their actions are full of pride. Their actions are full of anything really but a broken and contrite spirit that he will not despise. And the spirit of promiscuity among them is causing them to not know the Lord. And gosh, can't you see this playing out in our culture? Definitely a strong spirit of promiscuity in our culture. And it's resulting in a whole bunch of people, even lots of people that claim, just like the northern kingdom of Israel here, claiming that they know God, acting like they know God, but really don't know the Lord. Israel's arrogance testifies against them. Both Israel and Ephraim stumble because of their iniquity. So their arrogance is called out here. Their iniquity is called out here, causing them to stumble, testifying against them. Even Judah will stumble with them. And so there's also this community impact, that sin has. Any sin that you might be stuck in, it actually ends up oftentimes affecting your brothers and your sisters. And that's why Paul was so clear in 1 Corinthians talking about the sexually immoral and whether you should you shouldn't even eat with them is what he says. And he's not talking about the sexually immoral of the world because, well, the world will do what the world will do. Like, he's talking about people that claim to follow Christ and yet they are engaged in this sexual immorality. And so just recognizing that your sin in your life does not just impact yourself. It's one of the biggest lies that the enemy uses against us to try to convince us that the sin is no big deal. It's part of the temptation is the sin's not that big of a deal. And then once he's gotten you to commit the sin, then he switches the script to say, now you're so wicked and evil and dirty and broken that you can never be restored. And so on one hand, to try to convince you to partake in the sin, he says it's no big deal. On the other side, he tries to convince you that it's such a big deal that you will never recover. Dastardly plan. But he's played that play over and over and over again. They go with their flocks and herds to seek the Lord, but they do not find him. He has withdrawn from them. So, on one hand, you'll be like, well, doesn't the Bible say, if you draw near unto me, I will draw near unto you? And yes, the Bible does say that. And yes, the Bible does mean that. So, but they go with their flocks and herds to seek the Lord, but they do not find him. He has withdrawn from them because they betrayed the Lord, and indeed they gave birth to illegitimate children. Now the new moon will devour them along with their fields. And so really what's going on here is rather than come to him with their flocks and herds, i.e. sacrifices, it's just like in 1 Samuel when he addresses Saul, he says, man, obedience is better than sacrifice. I'd rather you obey me. I'd rather you do what I say than to bring your sacrifices. And obedience is a heart issue. So maybe if they went with their hearts and not just their flocks and herds, I bet you they would have found him. I bet you that he would have revealed himself to them. So they go with their flocks and herds to seek the Lord, but do not find him. He's withdrawn from them. And that is a yuck place to be for sure. But why is he removing himself? Why is he withdrawing? So let's keep on reading and see what happens. So we read verse 7. They betrayed the Lord indeed. They gave birth to illegitimate children, and now the new moon will devour them along with their fields. Blow the trumpet in Gibeah and the trumpet in Ramah. Raise the war cry in Bethaven. Look behind you, Benjamin. Ephraim will become a desolation on the day of punishment. I announce what is certain among the tribes of Israel. The princes of Judah are like those who move boundary markers. I will pour out my fury on them like water. Ephraim is oppressed, crushed in judgment, for he is determined to follow what is worthless. And this phrase right here, determined to follow what is worthless, is probably the real damning part of that statement, right? Determined to follow what is worthless. Man, Ephraim, the collective of Ephraim, it's worthless. Why are we pursuing something that's worthless? But honestly, that's the story of sin for you and for me. It's ultimately worthless. And yet so often our hearts are drawn to the worthless thing, and we become determined to follow it. So I'm like rot to Ephraim and like decay to the house of Judah. When Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his wound, Ephraim went to Assyria and sent a delegation to the great king. So interesting, when Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his wound, they went to Assyria. They went to Assyria to solve their problems. Have you read anything about the Assyrians? Do you know, are they aware who the Assyrians are? And so that's the craziest thing about the sin that Israel is lost in this season of their existence, has got them so blind and so messed up that they would look to Assyria for help in the midst of their trouble. But he cannot cure you or heal your wound. He cannot cure you or heal your wound. So many of the things that we run to, the gods that we, the little g gods that we try to pursue, we send a delegation to heal our wounds, to address those hurting parts in us. And yet they cannot cure or heal your wound. For I am like a lion to Ephraim and like a young lion to the house of Judah. Yes, I will tear them to pieces and depart. I will carry them off, and no one can rescue them. I will depart and return to my place until they recognize their guilt and seek my face. So again, they will search for me in my distress. So thank God we serve a God that, even though these are some harsh words, some really hard things to take in, like tearing them apart and tearing them to pieces and carrying them off, and no one can rescue them, and withdrawing from them. And yet he says the purpose behind all of it is until they recognize their guilt and seek his face and search for him in their distress, knowing that it's, you go back to the book of Judges and you watch the pattern of behavior. When things were good, they got real comfortable, they got real confident, and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. That resulted in evil and wickedness, which then resulted in punishment and usually servitude to some other nation. Then things would get real bad and they would search for him in their distress. So they would return to the Lord as a result of the distress they were experiencing. So one, thank God we serve a God that is willing to put us through the things we need in order to draw our hearts to him. Secondly, I would say, maybe let's try to seek him when we're not in distress. Let's try to bring him our broken and contrite heart when things are going just fine. Let's do that. So I hope you're encouraged today by the God that we serve, his amazing grace and mercy, and that he loves us so much that he's willing to withdraw from us for a time. He's willing to bring the discipline that we need to reveal to us so that we can recognize our guilt and seek his face and search for him in our distress. And yet his heart's cry is that we would seek him at all times and not just in those hard times. So with that, God bless you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.